The Canterbury Tales, The Merchant's Prologue, Tale, and Epilogue Summary. Prompted by all the talk of husbands and wives, the merchant chimes in saying he is married to a horrible woman, nothing like Griselda. He complains that the life of married men is grief and care. Harry Bailey asks him to tell a story. January, an old and phosphorus king, lives in Lombardy, a bachelor for most of his life. He now has a strong desire to be married and have an heir. He gathers his friends and tells them his desire. His two friends, Placebo and Justinus, disagree on whether January should get married. Placebo tells him to go for it, while Justinus urges caution, but most of January's friends agrees that his plan is excellent. January considers many women before deciding upon one, a young woman named May. The two are soon married. A squire named Damien, who works for January, sees May and instantly desires her. He writes her a letter telling her of his love and places it in a purse. Sick with love, he lays in bed. January, feeling bad for his ill squire, sends May to comfort the man. As she sits by his bedside, the man secretly passes her the purse containing his letter. May reads the letter and writes back agreeing to meet him secretly. As time passes, January goes blind, and his blindness causes him to guard his wife jealously, keeping her close to him all the time. Because she is unable to get away and meet Damien, May and Squire sadly exchange nothing but letters. Together they make a plan. May takes the key to January's private walled-in garden and makes a wax impression of it, which she gives to Damien to duplicate. One day, January takes May to his private garden. May signals to Damien that he should sneak in the garden gate. Once inside, May gestures to him to climb into a pear tree. Then she tricks January into giving her a boost up into the tree to pick a pear to eat and meets Damien in branches. As they are having sex, the god Pluto suddenly restores January's sight and he looks up into the tree, becoming very angry. May tells him that his sight is not very good because she and Damien were struggling in the tree, not having sex. January believes her. Harry Bailey exclaims that women are full of cunning tricks and says his own wife has many vices. Analysis. The Merchant's Tale is another example of a fabula, but one that uses elements of romance to set up readers' expectations before descending into the trickery and adultery characteristics of fabula. January, the old knight of good renown, marries a young beautiful lady of wise self-discipline and gentle ways, while other fabulogues feature less refined characters such as members of middle class or churchmen of questionable morals. These characters are as noble as those of Knight's Tale. Readers then are led to expect a romance. It is not until after the marriage feast that signs of shenanigans to come become apparent. Even then, the language is lofty or perilous, fire kindled in the bedding, domestic traitor with the danger spreading. Yet descent into shenanigans eventually begins with May's dissatisfaction at her husband's sexual appeal. Wearing his nightcap with his crony throat, she didn't think his games were worth a groat. This tale is also rich with symbolism. The winter old January is symbolic of old age, and spring fresh young May is symbolic of youth. The garden is symbolic of sexual energy but also of Eden. So fair a garden never was there known. Into the Eden May Eve allows in an adder a snake. This is consistent with the idea believed at that time that Eve and women in general were to blame for the biblical being cast out of Eden. The key, of course, that unlocks the world in garden is not so subtle sexual euphemism. January's blindness, while a physical affliction, is also symbolic. January is so blinded by lust for his young wife, he sits in the wedding feast as in a trance. Later, the narrator begs him to see your servant Damien, even now is meditating willingly. This fulfills what is said earlier in the tale. Love is always blind and cannot see. January's blindness is a physical manifestation of his gullibility, reflecting the medieval belief that a person's shortcomings and sins could become visible in physical illness. Situational irony plays a role in the humor of the final sequence of events. First, when May asks him for a boost up into the tree, blind January complains that there is no boy about to lend a hand. Of course, there is a boy about waiting for May in the tree. When January regains his sight, he wants to behold his love. When he does see her, she is in the arms of another man. The Squire's Prologue and Tale Summary. Harry Bailey now calls on the Squire to tell a tale. Part 1. King Cambuscan was a man of many good qualities, honorable and wise, and he had a beautiful daughter named Canis. On the 8th of March, he gives a splendid, lavish feast to celebrate his 20th year as a king. A strange knight arrives at the feast wearing ornate armor. Giving an elaborate speech, he presents gifts to the king, a brass horse with fantastical abilities, a mirror that can identify friends or enemies, and a magic sword. To Canis, the knight presents a golden ring that will let her understand every language, even that of animals. Part 2. Canis wakes up early and goes for a walk. The birds are singing and Canis understands what their songs mean. She hears a falcon crying in distress, so she asks what is wrong, and Falcon explains that her lover, a hawk, suddenly left her for another. Canis, pitying the falcon, takes the bird home and bandages her wounds. At this point, the Squire will tell of the magic ring and of Canis' brother and father. But first, he will tell stories about several other heroes. No sooner does he begin part 3 of his story than Franklin interrupts, congratulating the Squire on his eloquent storytelling. Harry Bailey then tells the Franklin to tell a tale, and Squire's story remains unfinished. Analysis. The story the Squire begins to tell seems to be romance, and it bears some resemblance to another interrupted tale. Chaucer's story of Sir Topaz. Both take place in spring among its singing birds, involve magic and magical beings, and feature characters of high rank. Yet within the romance narrative is the very unromantic story told by the Lady Falcon, whose lover left to be with another. The connection between story and storyteller is clear in this tale. The Squire is a chivalrous youth who has traveled to many exotic lands and has likely heard stories of magical horses, rings, and other fantastical objects. As the king's son, he is familiar with genre of epic romance and of the way one tells such a story. The Franklin even compliments the Squire's storytelling style as being very eloquent. His characters are idealized. The king is powerful and wise and brave, compassionate and just, while the heroine Canis is beautiful beyond the Squire's ability to describe. The tone, the author's attitude towards the subject is similar to that of Chaucer's Sir Topaz story. Both are a little silly, and the Plots advance due to odd details. In Sir Topaz, the Song of Spring Birds calls sends him suddenly and forcefully into love longing. In this story, Candace gets up for her walk while everyone else sleeps off hangovers. The squire's storytelling style is verbose and convoluted, which may be why the Franklin cuts him off. Chaucer may be making fun of romance genre, or he may be using the squire to mock his own ambitions as a storyteller. After all, his Canterbury Tales project was originally conceived of a 120 stories, many containing stories within stories, a plan that proved overly ambitious and which he ultimately pared back to 24 stories.